cognitive psychology with no bias, news of cognitive psychology with no exemption, holds nothing but truth, broadcasting life at different rule. This is the SJC News Patrol.
Judgment and decision making. In the course of our daily lives, we constantly are making judgments and decisions. One of the most important decisions you may have made is that of whether and where to go to college. Once in college, you still need to decide on which courses to take. Later on, you may need to choose a major field of study. You make decisions about friends, dates, and how to relate to your parents, how to spend money, and countless other things. How do you go about making these decisions? Finally, a bias that can affect all of us is the hindsight bias. We can look at a situation retrospectively. We believe that we can see all of the side events leading up to a particular outcome. Like for example, suppose that people are asked to predict the outcome and the psychological experiment in advance of the experiment. So people are able to predict the outcomes at a better than chance level. However, when people are told of neuroscience of decision making, as in problem solving, the prefrontal cortex, and particularly the anterior cingulate cortex, is active during the decision making process. So the exploration of decision making in monkeys have noted activation in parietal regions of the brain itself. So the amount of gain associated with the decision also affects the amount of the activation observed in the parietal region. So the examination of decision making in drug abusers identify the number of areas involved in a risky decision. The researcher studied drug abusers because of drug abuse. So heuristic and deductive reasoning. So heuristic and syllogistic reasoning included an overextension error. So in these errors, we overextend the use of strategies that work in some syllogism to syllogism in which the strategies fall us. For example, although reversal work well with the universal negatives, they do not work with the other kinds of premises. We also experience foreclosure effects when we fail to consider all of the possibilities before reacting in a conclusion. Biases. In the next section, we discuss several biases that frequently occur when people make decisions, such as illusory correlation, overconfidence, and the hindsight biases. The rules of probability, we have the example hypothetical and the calculation of the probability itself. So, the first example of the hypothetical example would be Lee is one of the 10 highly qualified candidates applying for a one scholarship. What are Lee's chances of getting this scholarship? So the calculation probability would be Lee has a 0.1 of getting this scholarship. The second hypothetical example would be if Lee is one of the 10 highly qualified scholarship students applying for a one scholarship, what are Lee's chances of getting this scholarship? The second calculation probability would be is 1 minus 0.1 is equivalent to 0.9. So Lee has a 0.9 chance of not getting this scholarship. The third hypothetical example would be Lee's roommate and Lee are one among the 10 highly qualified scholarship students applying for a one scholarship. What are the chances that one of the two will get the scholarship itself? So the calculation for that would be 0.1 plus 0.1 is equivalent to 0.2. So we have that there is a 0.2 chances that one of the two roommates will get the scholarship itself. So improving our deductive reasoning skill, even without the training, you can improve your own deductive reasoning through developing strategies to avoid errors. For example, an unsuspicious politician might state that we know that some suspicious looking people are illegal aliens. We also know that some illegal aliens are terrorists. Therefore, we can ensure that some of those people whom we think are suspicious are terrorists. So, that they are not out to destroy our country, that the politician's syllogistic reasoning is wrong. So, if some A are B and some B are C, it is not necessarily that the case that any A are C. This is obvious when you realize that some men are happy people and some happy people are women. But this does not simply imply that some men are women. Make sure that you are using the proper strategies in solving syllogism. Remember that reversal only works with the universal negatives. So sometimes translating abstract terms to concrete ones can help. Also take the time to consider contrary example and create more mental models. So the more mental models you use for the given set of a premises, the more confident you can be that if your conclusion is not valid. It will consider evolution and reasoning. A different approach to conditional reasoning takes an evolutionary view of cognition. So this view asks what kinds of thinking skills would provide a naturally selective advantage for humans in adapting to our environment across evolutionary time. To gain insight into a human condition, we should look to see what kinds of adaptation would have been most useful in a distinct past. So we hypothesize on how human hunters and gatherers would have thought during the millions of years of evolutionary time that predated the relatively recent development of agricultural and the very recent development of our industrial societies. So rationalism and empiricism. So one way of understanding errors in syllogistic reasoning is in terms of a particular logical error made, independently of a mental processes that the reasoner has been used. For example, affirming the consequent is a logical error. So one need to know empirical research to understand at the level of symbolic logical the errors that has been made. Moreover, deductive reasoning is itself based on rationalism. So, syllogisms such as all toys are chairs, all chairs are not hot dogs, therefore all toys are hot dogs is a logical valid but factually incorrect. Thus, deductive logic can be understood at a rational level. Independently of that, its empirical content, but if we wish to know psychological why people make errors or what is factually true, then we need to combine empirical observation with the rational logic. The gist of it, do heuristic help us or lead us to astray? So when we say heuristic, it does not always lead to the wrong judgment or poor decision. Indeed, we use these mental shortcuts because they are often right. Sometimes, they are amazingly simple ways of drawing sound conclusions. For example, a simple heuristic, take the best, can be amazingly effective in decision situation. So the rule is simple. In making decision, we should identify the single most important criterion to you for making that decision. For example, when you choose a new automobile, the most important factor might be good as gas mileage, safety, or appearance. Make your choice on the basis of that attribute. So when we say fallacies, heuristics and fallacies are often studied together because they go hand in hand. The application of a heuristic to make a decision may lead to a fallacies in thinking. So therefore, when we discuss some fallacies, we refer back to some of the heuristics and association in which they often occur. Heuristic and biases. The world is full of information and stimuli to a different kinds. In order to function properly and not to get overwhelmed, we need to filter out the information we need among the many different pieces of information available to us. The same holds true for decision making. In order to be able to make a decision without a reasonable time frame, we need to reduce the available information to a manageable amount. So, when we say heuristic, it helps us to achieve this goal and at the same time decrease our efforts by allowing us to examine fewer cues or deal with the fewer pieces of information. However, sometimes our thinking also gets biases by our tendency to make decisions more simply. The mental shortcuts of heuristics and biases enlighten us the cognitive load of making decisions, but they are also allowing us for a much greater chance of error. We will explore both heuristic and biases in the next detail in our next section. Enhancing deductive reasoning. So to enhance our deductive reasoning, we may try to avoid heuristic and biases that distort our reasoning. We also may engage in practices that facilitate reasoning. For example, we may take longer to reach or to evaluate conclusion. So when we say effective reasoner, it also considered more alternative conclusion than do poor reasoner. So in addition, training and practices seem to increase performance on reasoning tasks. So the benefits of the training tend to be strong when the training later to pragmatic reasoning schemas or to touch some field of law and medicine. So the benefits are weaker for abstract logical problem, divorced from our everyday life.
Analogical reasoning is a kind of reasoning that is based on finding a common relation system between two situations, exemplars or the mean. The purpose of analogies are numerous. They might give us a chance to draw new conclusions about a new circumstances using inductive reasoning. Using analogies can also be a powerful tool for persuasion, clarification, and information. For example, she is hot as hell, her coat is white as a ghost, she is tough as nail. One of the most important cognitive biases that occur both in inductive and deductive reasoning is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency of people to selectively look for information that confirms their own opinions or viewpoints is known psychologically as confirmation bias. It is your initial instance, you only just need to support the idea. For example, you are having a bad experience with your professor and you discredit her ability and credibility to teach, and It causes the negative effect in others' memory because you tell them publicly or privately. Gomber's fallacy refers to the erroneous thinking that a certain event is more or less likely given a previous series of events. The results of one or more events cannot affect or anticipate the result of the following event if the events in the series are random and unrelated to one another. The Gomber's fallacy involves incorrectly determining whether a sequence of events is truly random and independent, drawing the incorrect conclusion that the outcome of the subsequent event will be the exact opposite of the result of the series of events that came before. For example, if you toss a coin 10 times and the result is always head, doesn't necessarily mean that if you toss again the coin for 11 times, the result will be a tail. It will always be a 50% chances. Classical decision theory. A classical decision theory assumes that the decision should be completely rational and optimal. The theory employs an optimizing strategy that seeks the best possible alternative to maximize the achievement of goals. The Watson selection test developed in the mid-1960s. It evaluates subjects' ability to find facts that violate a hypothesis. For example, you are told these 4 cards represent patrons in a bar, and each card has their drink on one side and their age in years on the other. You are given a rule about the 4 patrons, then they must be at 21 years old or older. You are asked which cards do you need to turn over in order to determine if the rule is being followed. The correct answer is, you should pick the beer card and the 19 card. That is the correct answer. Representativeness heuristic involves estimating the likelihood of an event, comparing it to an existing prototype that already exists in our mind. People tend to stereotype or assign associative characteristics to people, rather than using logic and probability to make certain decisions. Instead, people form stories in their minds that they try to represent reality as accurately as possible. Everyone has equations that feel more probable due to the stereotyping conjunction bias that we combine different scenarios, and it is based on prior knowledge, maybe from the movies and etc. For example, if we see a person wearing a lab gown, they must be a doctor. Or if we see a person wearing a coat and tie, carrying a briefcase, they must be a lawyer.
In decision theory, the influence of framing effects is also considered, wherein our decisions regarding information is dependent on how it was presented to us. In simpler words, how the options are introduced to us will be the deciding factor in choosing a particular option over the others. In choosing options, we tend to choose options in where we won't have to take risks over options that have potential gains. That is, we tend to choose the option that is certain no matter how small the gain is, rather than the larger but uncertain gain. There is an exception to this, however. If the uncertain gain is tremendously greater or only a little uncertain, we may be more attracted to this option. An example of this would be, Program A will save 100 people, while Program B has 1/3 chance of saving 500 and 2/3 chance of saving none. The likelihood that we will choose Program A is higher because the gain is certain, even if the gain is smaller than Program B, in which the gain is higher but is uncertain. Framing effects is also socially relevant. For instance, political figure speeches can have a number of implications. How is it framed depends on how is it presented. A message concerning Ku Klux Klan is an example. Is it a free speech issue or a public safety issue? In framing effects, the lower the reliability or credibility of the messenger, the less persuasive it would be. Opportunity costs refer to the things, situations, or opportunities that you will have to let go in order to pursue another opportunity, or an individual's losses when an opportunity is pursued over another. When weighing opportunities, a seemingly ideal one will not sound ideal anymore if you take opportunity costs into consideration. For instance, a paralegal is interested to attend law school to become a lawyer. The opportunity costs that paralegal should consider is the resources he will spend during law school and the potential salary they could get as a practicing lawyer. Will the potential salary be worth it if he considers the time and money he spent in law school? Heuristics are strategies that we humans rely on to help us arrive at a decision and solve problems in a quick manner. For example, a student decides which subject she will take in a university. How can she arrive at a decision? She will most likely pursue the path that is the most interesting to her. She will use mental shortcuts to arrive at a decision with little available information. There are various types of heuristics that the next correspondent will now tackle. According to Irving Janis, there are several antidotes for groupthink. First, the one who leads the group should welcome constructive criticism, not hold any bias, and ensure the members seek opinions from people other than their very own. Moreover, alternative solutions to one problem can be discussed by forming subgroups. And the leader must make it a point to prevent spurious or bogus conformity to a group norm. Let's have a scenario. The Bay of Pigs invasion is regarded as an archetypal of groupthink. On April 17, 1961, in a failed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro, around 1,200 Cuban exiles invaded the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. Janis has proposed that John F. Kennedy, along with his group of advisors, suffered from groupthink. Janis found that JFK's advisors kept silent despite having doubts about the mission's success. There are several ways to counteract groupthink that we have discussed earlier. Generally, people use both bottom-up and top-down strategies when drawing their conclusions, meaning they use both information from sensory experience and the information from what they already know, or have concluded previously. Bottom-up strategies are based on observation of various stances and taking into consideration the degree of change across instances. It uses our sensory to analyze things that we see. For example, when you are walking into the bathroom in the middle of the night, you turn on the lights to see where you are going, instead of using your memory where things are in the bathroom. We form prototypes from these observations. Once a prototype or category has been produced, an individual then adds a new samples to a category by using focus sampling. An individual focuses on the features that provides the distinction. Meanwhile, top-down strategies include selectively looking for constancies within many variations. Perceptions are heavily based from our expectations and prior knowledge. For example, if half of a tree branch is covered and you can see the other half, you usually have an idea of what it looks like, even though the other half is not shown. This is because you already know what trees looks like for prior knowledge. Pragmatic reasoning schemas, or sometimes referred to as pragmatic rules, are general sets of principles or rules in relation to certain kinds of goals, namely permissions, obligations, or positions. Although not as abstract as formal logical rules, they are general enough to be applied in various situations. Thus, prior beliefs do matter in reasoning. On the other hand, perspective effects, that is whether a person will put himself in the shoes of one or the other, may affect a person's performance. When you take this into consideration, what may matter in problem solving are perspectives rather than permission. Pragmatic reasoning schemas help us infer what may be the most probable in a situation. I will give you a scenario. A guy who looks very young walks across the street then heads into a car. He enters the car and drives away. Your permission schema for driving is then activated by this observation. You think only 16 years older are permitted to drive alone, so this young man is at least 16 years old. Thus, you infer that the young-looking guy is at least 16 years old. Let's further explain what the previous correspondent has discussed. We now know that conditional reasoning is the inferences drawn based on a conditional or an if-then proposition. In the recent modification of the task that centers around drinking and age, plausibility, or the likelihood of something happening, influence can be observed wherein people choose the modus tollens argument or denying the consequent. To quote Psychology Dictionary, denying the consequent is if a conditional statement is accepted as true, then the negative can be inferred as well. End quote. For instance, between checking if an 18-year-old is drinking beer and checking if a 4-year-old is drinking beer, people would more likely use the modus tollens argument on the former.
One of the first decision-making developed in the 20th century was the economic man and woman. The term economic man, also referred to as Homo economicus, it refers to an idealized person who acts rationally with perfect knowledge and who seeks to maximize personal utility or satisfaction. To explain a phenomenon, scientists often build models, and to build these models, scientists have to make assumptions that simplify reality. In economics, one of those simplifying assumptions is a person who is fundamentally rational in economic situations, unlike an actual human. The base rate fallacy is a decision-making error in which information about the rate of occurrence of some trait in a population is ignored or not given appropriately. There have been a number of explanations why the base rate fallacy occurs. One explanation is that people tend to use heuristic or mental shortcuts when making decisions. This can lead to error in judgment, as people do not take the time to process all of the available information and weigh it up properly. Another explanation for the base rate fallacy is that people tend to focus on a specific case or example at hand, rather than thinking about the broader picture. Finally, the base rate may also occur because people have general bias against thinking about probability and statistics. Conditional reasoning is any form of reasoning that involves conditional. A conditional is an if-then statement. Example, if Omar misses work, then he will lose his job. The clause that follows the if is called antecedent. The clause that follows the then is called the consequence. So, the conditional reasoning also involves argument with if-then statements. There are two valid rules of conditional reasoning, modus ponens and modus tollens, and there are two invalid forms of conditional reasoning, affirming the consequence and denying the antecedent. Learning to distinguish the valid form from the invalid form is essential to constructing and recognizing good arguments. The rules of deductive logic apply equally in all domains. One can apply them, for example, to abstract or to concrete content. But research has shown that psychologically deductive reasoning with concrete content is easier than reasoning with abstract content. Although the rules of apply in exactly the same way generally across domains, ease of application is not psychologically equivalent across those domains. The domain, specificity, and generality of an important critical thinking skill was examined by administering 9 reasoning and decision-making tasks to 125 adults. Optimal performance on all of the tasks required that disjunctive processing strategy requiring the exhaustive consideration of all the possible states of the world be adopted. The everyday conditional reasoning task contains familiar concept conditional, with the antecedent and the consequence being the cause and effect. Respectively, if a glass is dropped in the kitchen, then there is a sound. If someone's finger is cut deeply while cooking, then it will bleed. If someone jumps into a pool, then they will get wet. If someone breaks their arm, then they will hurt.
The verbal structure of the introductions, conditionals, and answer alternatives were based on previous studies on conditions.
Trisky and Kahneman showed that when subjects were asked to rate the likelihood of several alternatives, including single and joint events, they often made a conjunction policy. That is, they rate the conjunction of two events as being more likely than one of the constituent events. This they claim is a fallacy, since the conjunctions of two events can never be more probable than either of the component events. In addition, they found that prior training in probability theory does not decrease the likelihood of making this fallacy. We argue that in some contexts, an alternative that contains the conjunctions of two events can be more probable than an
Naturalistic decision-making. Many researchers contend that decision-making is a complex process that cannot be reproduced adequately in the laboratory because real decisions are frequently made in situations where there are high stakes. This criticism has led to the development of a field of study that is based on decision-making in natural environments. So yung naturalistic decision-making daw is concerned kung paano ang tao nakakapag-desisyon in complex real-world setting. For example, is real-time decision in urgent situations. Groupthink is one of the disadvantages of group decision-making. Groupthink is a phenomenon characterized by premature decision-making that is generally the results of group members attempting to avoid conflict. So what conditions lead to groupthink? According to Janice, there are three kinds. One, it's an isolated, cohesive, and homogeneous group is empowered to make decisions. Two, objective and impartial leadership is absent within the group or outside. Last is high levels of stress impinge on the group decision-making process. Categorical syllogism is a most well-known kind of syllogism. In the case of the categorical syllogism, the premises state something about the category membership of the terms. It comprises of two premises and a conclusion. Example of this is all cognitive psychologists are pianists. All pianists are athletes. Therefore, all cognitive psychologists are athletes. All cognitive psychologists are pianists and all pianists are athletes are the two premises, while the conclusion is, therefore, all cognitive psychologists are athletes. Causal interference. One approach used in studying inductive reasoning is to examine causal interference. Causal interference is how people make judgments about whether something causes something else. So, ang isang approach na ginagamit, ipag-aaralan mo ang inductive reasoning is yung causal interference. Ito yung isang rason sa konklusyon na yung isang bagay is the cause ng isa pang bagay. Example is from the fact that one hears the sound of the piano music, then one may infer that someone is playing a piano.
Do you know what is elimination by aspect is? Elimination by aspects is first proposed by the psychologist named Amos Tversky in 1972. In this approach, we will evaluate things that we choose, and we choose its characteristics and its features. And when an item fails to meet our criteria, we can cross them out to our list. And that is the example of elimination by aspects. Do you know what is overconfidence? Overconfidence is when an individual over-evaluates their skill, knowledge, and their judgment. It also refers to a biased way of looking to a situation. When an individual is overconfident, they misjudge their values, opinions, beliefs, and abilities. Kahneman and Tversky of 1996 stated that people overestimate the accuracy of their judgment. For example, when people are 100% when people are 100% confident in their answers, they were 80% right at the time. Do you know what is group decision making? Group decision making is ubiquitous in our everyday life. Even decisions are made individually. Decision makers tend to accept suggestions or advices from other people. Last time we talked about the group decision making, and now we will talk about its benefits. So, Salasberg and Cannon-Bowers of 2002 stated that group decision making can increase the ideas and the resources. And also, Hinz of 2002 stated that group decisions are improved group memory over individual memory. We will now talk about how do people solve categorical syllogisms. Various theories propose as to how people solve categorical syllogisms. One of the earliest theory was the atmosphere bias by Beg Denny of 1969, Woodward Cells of 1935. This is their basic idea of this theory. If the individual comes up with a negative premises, they tend to solve it with a negative solution. That is the example of atmosphere bias. We will now talk about mental models representing the syllogisms. Philip Johnson Laird and Mark Stigman hypothesized that people use various mental models to represent an item within a syllogism. For example, Nickerson of 2004 stated that people can improve their reasoning by being taught how to draw a circle. And also, another example, Fleming et al. 2006, Knopf and May stated that even blind person can create spatial mental models to assist them in their reasoning. There are two types of experiments in the mental model. The role of working memory was studied in the syllogistic reasoning, Gilguli et al. 2002. In the first experiment, syllogism presented either visually or orally. Oral presentation put a higher load in the working memory because the participants must remember the premises. On the other hand, the visual presentation condition is the participants could look at the premises. As per predicted, the results was low in the oral presentation. In the second experiment, the participants will solve syllogisms while performing another task. The researchers found out that the task drew on the memory was interfered in the syllogistic reasoning. Do you know what is inductive reasoning? Inductive reasoning aims at developing a theory and it relies on patterns. Johnson Laird of 2002 states that inductive reasoner use probable conclusion to predict the
Deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is the process of reasoning from one or more general statement regarding what is known to reach a logically certain conclusion. It is often involved reasoning from one or more general statement regarding what is known to the specific application of the general statement. Deductive reasoning has two logical bases, which is logical proposition and the logical premises. So first is the logical proposition. It is an assertion which may be either true or false, and the other one is the logical premises or proposition about which argument are made. Deductive reasoning is useful because it helps people connect various propositions to draw conclusion. Cognitive psychologists want to know how people connect proposition to draw conclusion. Some of these conclusions are well reasoned, others are not. Sanko's fallacy. This fallacy represents the decision to continue to invest in something simply because one has invested in it before and one hopes to recover one's investments. On the other hand, we are making decisions that are irrational and lead to suboptimal outcomes. We are focused on our past investment instead of our future and cost benefits, meaning that we commit ourselves to decisions that are no longer in our best interest. Availability heuristic. It is refers on how we can make judgment on the basis on how easily we can call to mind what we perceive as relevant instances of a phenomenon. For example, imagine you are considering either or Jane to employees at your company for a promotion. Both have a steady employment record, so Jane has been the highest performer in her department during her tenure. However, in Jane's first year, she unwittingly delayed a company project when her computer crashed. The vivid memory of having lost that project likely weighs more heavily on the decision to promote Jane than it should. This is due to the availability heuristic, which suggests that singular memorable moments have an outside influence on decisions. Good morning, Pimas Institute College, Manila. I am Jean Rizai, your anchor at SJC News. And for today, October 3, 2022,
I will be your anchor about the headline Subjective Expected Utility Theory in Cognitive Psychology. Subjective Expected Utility Theory. According to Subjective Expected Utility Theory, the goal of human action is to seek pleasure and avoid pain. In this theory, in making decision, we have two phases, which is to maximize pleasure, referred as positive utility, and to minimize pain, referred as negative utility. However, each of us uses calculation of two things. One is subjective utility, and the second one is the subjective probability. The subjective utility, which is a calculation based on the individual judge weighting of utility or value rather than objective criteria. The second one is the subjective probability, which is a calculation based on the individual estimates of likelihood rather than objective statistical computation. So the difference between this model and the former one is that here the ratings in weight are subjective, whereas in the former model, they are supposedly objective. So scientists soon noticed that human decision-making is more complex than even this modified theory implies. In particular, when you have seriously considered every aspect of a decision, rated each possible choice, weighted the choice, and then you use your favorability ratings in weight to compute an average evaluation of each of the choices, probably not recently. Neuroscience of reasoning. The process of reasoning involves the prefrontal cortex. Further reasoning involves brain areas associated with working memory such as the basal ganglia. One would expect working memory to be involved because reasoning involves the integration of information which needs to be held in working memory while it is being integrated. The basal ganglia are involved in a variety of functions, including cognition and learning. This area is also associated with the prefrontal cortex through a variety of connections. Nature versus nurture. Nature is what we think of as free riding and influenced by genetic inheritance and other biological factors, while nurture is generally taken as the influence of external factors after conception, the product of exposure, life experiences, and learning on an individual.
Okay, audience, that's all of the news for today. We meet again in the same time, same channel. Thank you for your attention and goodbye.